Matthew Stuckey here, and I'm giving you another soul winning tip on the topic of silent partners, and I'm focusing on silent partner do's. And in the last video, I focused on the don'ts of being a silent partner, and I talked about how we need to make sure we stay silent and don't try to interrupt or distract the lead soul winner at that door from preaching the gospel. And these are introductory tips, and so if you're watching this and you're a silent partner still trying to learn how to go soul winning, of course you're trying as a silent partner to learn how to do this. But I do want you to realize that even as a silent partner, you still serve a valuable role and a valuable function. Even if you are not leading conversations, you can actually help people get saved. And you say, how can I help people get saved if I'm not leading any conversations? Well, point number one, and this is the big one, stop distractions. Stop distractions. It is your job as a silent partner to stop any distractions that might come up and prevent the person from getting saved that's listening to the gospel. You know, a great example of this is when you talk to people in groups. And if you talk to a group of 4 people, you're likely to have at least one person who does not want to listen. And unfortunately, if there's 3 people that want to listen and one person that does not want to listen, oftentimes that one person prevents all 3 of them from actually getting to hear the gospel and pay attention and end up getting saved. We have a great example of this in the Bible with Acts chapter 26, where Paul is giving a defense for himself, and he's using the opportunity to preach the gospel to King Agrippa. And it says in Acts 26 verse 24, "And as he thus spake for himself, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, thou art beside thyself. Much learning doth make thee mad." Now, what is Festus saying to Paul or about Paul? Well, he's telling Paul, you know what, Paul, you are crazy. And so, look, imagine if you're preaching the gospel and one of the people that's listening is like, you're insane. That's a big distraction from preaching the gospel. Now, of course, Paul does not want to get into an argument with Festus because he realizes, well, Festus is not getting saved, but my main mission is to preach to King Agrippa. So in verse 25, he shuts down Festus and he says, "But he said, I am not mad, most noble Festus, but speak forth the words of truth and soberness. For the king knoweth of these things, before whom also I speak freely. For I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him, for this thing was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, believest thou the prophets? I know that thou believest." Then Agrippa said unto Paul, "Almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian." King Agrippa says, you almost persuaded me. I almost changed what I believed. And so Paul comes very close to getting King Agrippa saved. But I do want you to realize something, that when Festus interrupts, Paul shuts down Festus, but he also ends this soul-winning conversation. And I believe that Paul had the idea that he no longer had the opportunity to just have a conversation with Agrippa and find out what is in his heart. I think he realizes, I don't have 5 more minutes. I need to end this thing now and see if King Agrippa believes it, see if he's gotten it. And you know what? I wonder if Festus was not there, or I wonder if there was a silent partner that could have taken Festus aside, who's a distraction in this conversation. I wonder if Paul the Apostle could have gotten King Agrippa saved. I wonder if he would have spent just 5 or 10 more minutes to find out what was in King Agrippa's heart, find out the parts that he wasn't sure on, find out the parts that he was not quite persuaded on. I wonder if Paul would have ended up getting King Agrippa saved. Because we oftentimes focus on the fact that King Agrippa almost gets saved, but you also need to realize that Paul does end this conversation after Festus serves as a distraction. And I think the reason why is he no longer had an opportunity to really go into it, and he really needed to close and try to seal the deal. And unfortunately, King Agrippa was not yet ready, and he did not get saved. This sort of situation happens all the time in real life as well. If you're talking to a group of people, there's oftentimes one person who does not want to listen. If you're talking to 2 people, one person might be distracting and might be asking questions. Or maybe one person has, a lot of right beliefs and they just need to hear a clear presentation of the gospel, and somebody else, just does not agree with you on the fact that Jesus is God, or they just are of a different religion or a different Christian church or whatever, and then they're just basically arguing with you, whereas the other person's willing to listen. If you are a silent partner, what you should do in those conversations is just take that person aside and say, "Hey, can I talk to you about this?" And you want to stop them from distracting the conversation. This is something that experienced soul winners do when they're silent partners at doors. I did this past Sunday. My soul winning partner was preaching the gospel, and he had his young son with him. And this guy randomly comes up that we had not talked to. We didn't know who he was, and he walks over to us and says, "Is this kid baptized?" And I talked to this guy for about a minute, and he was a strange guy. I don't know what his deal was, but he ends up leaving after I talked to him for a minute, and my soul winning partner gets this lady saved at the door. But my soul winning partner told me in the afternoon that he almost stopped talking to find out what was going on, because obviously he wants to keep his son safe. And I want you to realize that if I was not there, I doubt that woman would have gotten saved, because he would have had to deal with that guy and make sure his son was safe, and it would have led to a distraction, and then the woman probably would not have ended up getting saved. And so look, if you're a silent partner, be ready to stop distractions if they come. If somebody's part of a Christian cult and they want to argue about whether or not Jesus is God or things such as that, you know what? You should try to take that person aside to let the other people hear the gospel. So number one, and this is the big thing, stop distractions. Number two, as a silent partner, you can pray for the conversation. As you're there, you should be praying for the conversation, praying that there are not distractions, praying that this person will be attentive and can end up getting saved. You should be praying for that conversation. And point number three, you should pay attention to the conversation. You should be paying attention to what's going on and what's being said. And this is especially true if you're trying to learn how to preach the gospel. Here's your opportunity to get some on-the-job training where it's live and in action. Somebody's soul is in the balance, and you're hearing the speaker, preach the gospel and see how things go. But even as someone who knows how to preach the gospel, you know what? When you're the silent partner, you should still be paying attention, because you never know if you might get called upon. You never know if you have to come in and step in and say something. You never know what might come up. So you want to know what the person believes, what their hang-up is, what verses are being used. You just always want to pay attention to the conversation in case you need to be a help in any way. So stop distractions, pray for the conversation, and pay attention to the conversation. And if you do that, you'll be a valuable silent partner. Even if you're not going out and preaching the gospel and getting people saved, you can still help people get saved. Anyways, thank you, and God bless.